Hi, my name is Mike from Flywheel, and we're going to get started on today's presentation. Just a few housekeeping things. You're going to be on mute during the presentation just so that we can get clear audio for everyone, but you're free to ask questions in the chat window on the Zoom webinar. We'll be talking for about 30 minutes today. If you do have something that comes up that you need to attend to during the webinar, we do have a recording that we'll be sending out after the webinar concludes. A little bit of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about Flywheel. We're going to talk about the history of trade wars and the effect on the economy and manufacturers. And we'll look at what's happening with the trade war today, how it affects you, and what to do about it. And then we'll be talking about the RMS roller grinder story. A little bit about us. We're located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We've been in business since 2008. We are 100% manufacturing focused, so we look at a lot of the trends in the industry and how that impacts manufacturers and how we can help manufacturers. We are focused on sales and marketing software for manufacturers, which is going to be the focus of the end of our presentation. A little bit about the trade war history. We'll start with that, and then we'll get into the current trade war. This is not new. Trade wars have been happening since millenniums ago. However, they really have become more of an economic factor in the past 75 years or so. And so this chart here kind of gives you an idea of some major trade wars that happened. During the Korean War, they actually froze all trade, and we actually ended up freezing trade with China during that time. There was a Treaty of Rome, which actually established the EU because of all the trade embargoes that were happening in Europe that were creating problems. An interesting one down here is the chicken war. This happens in France and Germany back in the 60s, where they put tariffs on our chickens, and it created an interesting situation where we were producing chickens that were a lot more chickens that were needed domestically, and chickens are not an asset that you can store on the shelf like inventory. They spoil. And so there was a huge number of chickens that got thrown away. And in addition, the prices of chickens crashed in the US, and it pushed a lot of chicken farmers out of business because they just weren't really prepared to deal with the change in demand. So they all kept producing at a high level until enough of them just went out of business. They really never recovered for a number of years. So that was an interesting one. And then the Soviet Union stopped buying grain, or we stopped buying grain from the Soviet Union when they invaded Afghanistan because we didn't agree with their decision making there. And so it ended up creating a huge surplus of grain there. It also pushed up our prices here significantly because there was a lot less grain in our supply chain here in America. So we needed to cut back on or purchase from other places or cut back on consumption. What ended up happening is the prices just went up for a period of time, and then we started purchasing from other places. So those are just some highlights from the trade wars that have happened. I wanted to point out the chart up at the top of my screen, and you'll notice that if you look at those dots at the top, you'll see that the economy contracted almost universally every time a trade war occurred. But the dip in our economy happened after the trade war, so or at the tail end of it. So there was a delayed impact of negative economic factors that happened after the trade war, and you would expect that because when you change supply and demand significantly, you create inefficiencies in the market, and so that causes a slowdown, and that happened every single time there was a major trade war. If you look at that chart, so that should cause us who are in the manufacturing sector to be concerned, because if you have a contraction in the economy, even if you're not directly impacted by the trade war, eventually, if overall consumption goes down and purchasing goes down, it's going to affect all of us. Now, it's too early to see what that is going to look like on this trade war, but I did want to show you another chart of the trade action we took, and then the reaction from China. And so, last year, for the most part, they matched anytime we did any sort of a tariff or embargo on goods, they matched it. Now this year we have gotten, at the end of last year and this year, we've gotten much more aggressive, and they have not, because of their trade surplus, been able to match the total size of tariffs, but it's still, I mean, you can see here it's accelerating significantly. And the last one is actually the largest one, just happened in May, so we really don't know what the impact of that's going to be, but there are a large number of additional sectors that are impacted, including semiconductors, which impacts a lot of our consumer electronics, because a lot of our iPhones and mobile devices are manufactured in China, so that's going to cause those prices to go up. I actually heard a stat this week that the price of iPhones will go up $150 per iPhone because of the 25% tariff. If you look at the percentage of iPhone insides that are made in China, and then the total cost of the phone equates to about $140. So that's a pretty significant increase in cost for just one specific good. So, where are we at with this whole thing? Well, this actually just came out a couple weeks ago. This is from Bloomberg, and there's thinking out there in the economist world that these last tariffs that went into place, both the tariff that we put in place and also the retaliation tariffs that China put in place, really could put us at that tipping point that we should be concerned. The 25% duties is enough that it has a real economic impact on the American consumer. The example of the iPhone is a good one, because people are just going to buy less iPhones, because $140 is a lot more for the average American consumer to pay for a phone. And so people might not upgrade their phones. That's going to reduce the number of phones manufactured, which is going to reduce overall GDP for some of these manufacturers are making phones here in America. So we'll see what happens, but it looks pretty significant. I did want to make this a little more specific. We're located in South Dakota, so this is just a real economic indicator of what's going to happen here. So we're a small state. 15 million is what we're going to pay. I saw some stats for Minnesota and other bigger states that are in the hundreds of millions. But as you start to see those tariffs ramp up, it creates an accelerating economic impact to the end consumer. And here in South Dakota, farmers and agriculture is a significant part of our economy. And so for us, the export market for our grain is an important component of our economy. And as those retaliatory tariffs start to happen, it creates a negative impact on our farmers in the real short term, because it's starting to it will affect grain prices in certain areas. Now, we had a flood this year, so we may be insulated in 2019, but in 2020, we'll certainly feel the impact of that. So really getting back to manufacturers, what is the impact on manufacturers? The first impact is there's going to be higher input costs on materials, whether that's steel or now semiconductors, but there's a whole host of other supply chain related materials that are going to be more expensive. Another thing that's interesting is the purchasing is going to move from one region to another. As tariffs start to happen between two countries, those countries have to start to purchase those products elsewhere. So there's a lot of inefficiencies created when manufacturers have to spend time sourcing materials from other regions, especially those who are in high consumption manufacturing. That's going to be a big deal for them. Price increase concern to end customers, both on the import side, because your prices are higher, but also if you're selling your goods or services to China or another country. Tesla right now is dealing with this, with trying to grow their automotive market in China. The tariffs are starting to affect them. Also, their cost of building is going up. They recently did get an exemption from the tariff on aluminum, but that was going to be a big deal because Teslas need to be light, so they use a lot of aluminum, so that was going to drive up their core costs. They did get an exemption to that, but they're Tesla, they're huge. There's a lot of other smaller manufacturers who are using aluminum that are going to spend more on that. And then what we see anytime you inject a lot of uncertainty into an economic engine is that you start to see pauses on purchasing. So if a end customer is looking at purchasing a machine, but the tariffs are currently in place, so the cost of the machine is up 10, 20%, they may actually wait, whether it's because they can't afford the new machine or they want to see if those tariffs are going to go away and the product is going to become less expensive in the future. Either way, it's a cut in orders, and that has a negative impact on manufacturers. So if you look at that as a whole, what do you do as a manufacturer to prepare yourself for whatever the impact of that's going to be? And our belief is really you need to do two things. the first thing you got to do is you got to get lean. So you got to cut as much waste out of the system as you can, so that if you do see a drop in orders, your expense base cost structure is already aligned or ready for that change in demand. And then the second thing you need to do is you have to get a really good bead on changes in demand, because if a rapid change does occur, you don't want to wait for orders to begin falling and to see the trend in orders, order sizes going down. You want to see it before it hits your orders, because once it hits your orders, if your supply chain and your company's expense base, employee base is already at a level to support a high level of orders and it drops, you're already going to be out of position. And in the last economic recession, we saw a lot of manufacturers who were really late on contracting. And so that meant that when they did actually resize, they did it too little too late. So then the correction was actually bigger, because they'd already overspent their expense base for too long. And so the expense cuts they had to make were even more dramatic. Whereas the manufacturers who had a really good beat on marketplace, the contractions they had were much more planned, much more organized, and therefore were less expensive. So when the market did come back, they were a lot better positioned to take advantage of it. And the ones who waited too long were out of position, and oftentimes, were permanently smaller. We had one manufacturer work with where they were at 100 million before, and they have contracted to 50 million, and they have really not recovered. They do not have the ability at a scale standpoint anymore, because of how draconian those cuts were to really take advantage of the boom market that happened later. So they're still a much smaller manufacturer because of their late expense cuts that they made. So in order to do these two things, the first thing we look at is there a methodology we can use to cut waste out of the system and get a better bead on changes in demand. And there's actually the same methodology we already use applies here, and that's the Toyota production system, or lean. I just highlighted a few areas of the Toyota production system that I think are especially valuable in a recession potential or a trade war marketplace. It's the focus on building your product for the lowest cost possible. That includes both in production and also in the front office and sales and marketing. Focusing on just in time, that helps you if demand changes, that you can change the amount of deliveries quickly, and you don't build up inventory because you're able to scale back on cost. And then produce just in time, or tack time, produce on demand. That's a key component of producing to demand rather than producing to stock. And manufacturers who produce to demand do a lot better than those who produce to stock, because if demand falls and you can sense that, it just automatically causes your production back end to contract, just because of how you do pull systems. And we're not going to get into a lot of the theory of lean today. We're going to talk more about applying it to sales and marketing, because if you don't have a good sales and marketing process, it's very difficult to produce to demand, because you don't know what demand is, and you don't have an efficient way to gauge that demand. So a little bit on the impact of the Toyota production system, and I'm calling it lean as well, because it's kind of the same methodology. You can see here that there's a lot of positive impacts for manufacturers, and this is for any change in demand. They just do much better. It's not just a trade war. If there's a recession or there's a change in your specific industry that causes demand to fall, you're much better positioned if you implement the principles of lean. And we're going to talk about some of those principles today. So what about sales and marketing, which is our focus? Well, the problem is a lot of manufacturers aren't positioned to thrive in a trade war because they haven't adopted lean in sales and marketing. They may have adopted it in production, but they haven't adopted it in sales and marketing. So right there is a problem. So first of all, what is the impact of adopting these kind of reducing waste, improving automation, improving data to make decisions? What is the impact on the business? And here's a PwC report on the growth speed of manufacturers who've adopted these principles, and you can see it's about 25% greater for those who have adopted it versus those who have not. Now, in today's market, you can see here everyone's still growing who's in manufacturing. It's just been a really good run here for us. But the ones who are not adopting it are growing at a much slower rate. And this is just total revenue growth. This is not looking at profitability. Profitability is about half if they've adopted these principles. So why haven't manufacturers adopted this? They haven't adopted automation and lean mostly because their environment hasn't evolved yet for this, but we're seeing that that's starting to change. And they're starting to put in technology to get more agile, to get more efficient in sales and marketing. And I think that this trade war, and if there's a recession afterwards, will probably accelerate this. So why haven't they adopted it? Well, there's a couple reasons. The first reason is sales and marketing people are generally more relational than process oriented. And that's not a criticism. That's just a personality trait. You want your sales and marketing people to be focused on customers and servicing their needs, not on technology. So that's kind of where companies like us come in. It's our job to equip them with the technology they need to do their jobs well. Secondly, sales and marketing is very automation driven, and these tools haven't connected to each other in the manufacturing space. Most vendors have not prioritized that. They've built kind of these silo apps that don't connect to each other. And it makes it very hard to automate processes across your sales and marketing team if you don't have them connected. And also, these tools haven't adopted sort of the Toyota production system lean thinking, so they're not really focused on eliminating waste. So that's the problem. However, if you can do it, this is what you get out of the other end. It's super important to know where demand is so you can adjust it. Using data is key to getting hard numbers on where things are at. And as I talked about before, you don't want to wait until orders fall before you begin making adjustments. You can't do that because you're out of position already. So what's the goal here? The goal here is to first get efficient in your process, your current process you have today. And then once you get efficient at it, you can move towards becoming more effective at data gathering, at even just orders per salesperson or dollars in revenue per dollar invested in sales and marketing. But first you have to get more efficient. And I believe that specifically in a tariff or recession potential environment, you got to focus on efficiency first. So in lean, there's a concept called the 8 wastes of lean. And these are the 8 wastes. We're going to drill into each one of them here. And then we're going to talk about kind of how you can optimize your sales and marketing process to eliminate this waste and get better information so that you can make better decisions in an environment where you need to make them quickly. So we're going to drop down this list. And the first one is defects. So defects in lean is defined as the delivering problems or incorrect information to a customer. This is applied to sales and marketing. If you're delivering the incorrect proposal or invoice, you're missing a meeting, you're forgetting to call back a lead, not hitting a delivery date. If you're in an environment where a customer may have more choices because the market is contracting, you want to make sure to hit this stuff 10 times out of 10. So how do you correct this? The first is you need to build a process for gathering customer requirements. In many manufacturers, if you're a design to order, engineer to order, getting a design checklist that each salesperson follows and that design engineers and production agree to is key. We recommend using a system to set callbacks and reminders, and then we recommend using a pull system to ensure dates are met. So if you have an order queue or an order ready for ordering queue, ready for production queue, make sure that that's a pull system so that people can see what's coming into that queue and what's going out of that queue, and not just production folks, but also in sales. So if you do end up missing a date, which you don't want to, you're able to communicate to the customer proactively and keep that relationship strong. All right, next one, overproduction. Calling the customer multiple times to get information. This is one we see a lot, where instead of just being able to grab all the information at once, sometimes salespeople have to go back to the customer multiple times. That slows the order process down, adds waste, and ultimately it can be frustrating for the customer if they're not able to get a quick quote and an accurate quote. And then manual trade show follow-up processes. If you're going to trade shows, especially if you're in an environment where it's competitive, you want to be following up with every single lead want to be touching them 3 to 5 times, and you want to do it in a automated fashion, or as automated as possible, so that that customer has the best experience with their brand. So here's what we recommend you do: create a design checklist and then automate trade show follow-up using a system. Waiting, wasted time. An example of this is no queue of cross-sell, upsell customer potential. So if you sell one product that has potentially another product that could be sold to that customer, and you expect salespeople to dig through data to manually find who they should cross-sell or upsell, or remember it, you've got a problem. They're probably not going to do that because they have relationships to manage, and you may be missing opportunities. Another one is customers who haven't been contacted. We call it a stale customer list. This is an example of low-hanging fruit, especially in a situation where you're trying to get salespeople to do a lot, where they have a lot of customers they're managing. If we ask them to try to remember who they haven't contacted for a period of time, that can create gaps in the process where customers never get contacted. We recommend that you create a process for that. Identify customers that can be cross-sold and upsold, create a list of them, track when you've contacted them last, hopefully automatically, and then make sure you define good process so that sales folks know where to focus their energy, especially if they're stretched. Waiting. Asking salespeople to enter data is not a good way to, this is underutilized talent. So asking salespeople to enter data is not a good use of their time. And then same as true with marketing people. So use workflow, integration, and then voice. There's a lot of technology out there for voice to text where salespeople can be out in the field and still take notes. And automate all of your list management so that when you're sending out emails or mailers, that it's using one source of the truth. People don't have to update things in multiple systems or manually build lists. And then overall, just build a focus on selling time. This is a few more that are on the list. So I just want to throw out, transportation, inventory, and motion. These are just wastes that we oftentimes talk about in Lean. Under the solution side, we recommend you build a map of customers so that you can sell efficiently if you're out in the field. Make sure that you give salespeople real-time information about what's available so they can sell it. Or if there's a concern in demand, that they can focus on selling a product where there's too much of it. And then again, automate reminders. Automate. Salespeople need to be focused on selling, not on trying to remember what to do. The last one I want to talk about is extra processing. This is one we see a lot of, which is these systems are not connected. So if you have like an ERP system that's not connected to your CRM, or you don't have a CRM, and your email marketing people keep lists separately, that should all be in one place. So connect these systems. This is something we can help with. Flywheel connects all these systems together so there's one source of the truth. And make sure your sales process is clean in your system so it's clear and it's not redundant putting information in. Here's an example of that. This is in Flywheel. This is a 360-degree view of dealers and customers, so you can see when you last talked to them, what they purchased, as far as volume goes, whether or not they're green, yellow, red, in terms of health. And then this all is used for building marketing lists so that you can do follow-up. All right, we're going to wrap up by talking about the RMS Roller Grinder story. They're a company that we work with, and they spent a lot of time working on this, so they're positioned for growth. They're growing at double digits per year, and they are really focused on optimizing the efficiency of their sales team. They can't hire people fast enough to grow at the rate they want to grow, so they looked at us as a way to help them grow efficiently. So this is what we did. We performed an efficiency assessment. We reviewed their process. We built a process map. We identified some key things we could do to help them, and then we updated their systems using continuous improvement. So this is what we did first. We did an efficiency assessment. This is a report we offer for free. You can get one of these by going on our website. It's about a 15-minute assessment, and then we provide you with a report on how you score versus peers. We did that for them, and we found some potential. Then what we did is we did what's called a process map. This is what an example one looks like. So we just mapped their whole process from beginning to end. And the key thing you'll see here is we have the low-hanging fruit section. I'm going to zoom in on that, where we identified the key things that they could do that would move the needle for them. that would have a big impact that were low cost for them to implement. And this is what we found in their process that we could eliminate. So we automated their data entry, we streamlined some of their pull systems, and then we automated a bunch of things which improved their effectiveness. So I'm going to show you a quick video here of a meeting I had with their Vice President of Sales. This is Blake, and I worked with him on building out their process and implementing the system. So we're going to listen to him and what he had to say about what they did.
With the company for 5 years. I started as a process engineer, really working on the production side. And as a position came open, I worked my way into sales, and then sales came into managing and leading it. And so right now, what I do for the team is I lead and manage the overall sales team and really the customer experience. And there's been just consistent growth year over year as we've continued to really sharpen our focus, define our processes, grow our customer base, and really try to focus on building a great team and hopefully positively impacting their lives. The biggest challenge that we faced was it was about 1.5 years ago. We were trying to increase sales, and so we had a process which was a very manual process. Moving work orders through on a paper we had was not scalable. Because it was really manual and required a lot of like tribal knowledge. If this happens, then this has to happen. How do we get rid of some of the administrative side? How do we get rid of some of that tribal knowledge that you just acquire after years of being here or having to make mistakes, and make it more automated, simplified, and hopefully more accurate? Hiring an administrative person to just do paperwork is non-value add, but looking at it like, can you get it out there without having to have someone dedicated to that service? And so that was kind of the first reason why we looked at it, like, how do we make it so our salespeople can sell more yet have less administrative time and not have to add that administrative person yet. One of the things that the team has told me the biggest benefit is just linking our emails directly to Flywheel. As we email and correspond with clients and stuff like that, it's almost creating a history log or a thread. And they've said like how much just that little change, how much time it really saved them. It just automatically did it. And it happens in the background and you don't even realize it and notice it. Like just little things like that were really what pointed it out for them. And so what we have seen is we've seen the ability to have more pay time. And on an average, we're averaging about 30 minutes to an hour more a day for team members right now. Lean can and absolutely should be applied to all aspects of business. How good are we at communicating what's going to happen, how it's going to happen? Is the process relatable and understandable? Do we have the right parts and everything like that? So by automating that and making it more present for our team to be able to pull it up and stuff like that, we should yield higher NPS scores. Automation and information readiness is key to that. The alternative that we looked at that we actually considered was implementing an ERP system, which is hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of dollars to implement it, because that's the same idea of being able to do workflows within an ERP system. And as we looked at what that would take to do, the cost of it, and knowing that it was our process is an ever evolving thing, made it really unattractive. So that was where we can come in with something that's more customizable. And that was something that was really appealing to me from a price point, customizable, and we could fit to our business model. The relationship that you guys and the you guys working with us, the response and stuff like that, that's definitely a 10. Your guys' customer service side is a 10. Your guys' willingness and ability to kind of customize it to fit our business model is what's made it really attractive.
They've been a great client to work with, and they took a lot of ownership of the process that we went through with them and really enabled us to get the outcomes that we hoped for. And what we did see is we saw a 6-figure improvement in cost efficiency in sales and marketing, and a double-digit growth for the year that we implemented this, and we continue to see that today. So these are some things we specifically did. We cut their what they call non-selling time by about an hour per day. I think it's a little bit above that now. We've added some additional things. In addition, we cut their data entry time, where they had to put in data more than once, or as Blake mentioned, they had to write it down on paper, and now it's all automated and digitized. We cut that by about 95%. And we automated a lot of the transition points between people and teams so that there's no manual steps that need to happen, so the process runs much more reliably. And if somebody's out of the office or paper doesn't get stuck on their desk, it's all in the system so somebody else can grab it out of the queue and process it efficiently. So that wraps up kind of the content of today's webinar. Thank you for your time today. I wanted to throw out a couple of the options for you to proceed. The first one is feel free to do a sales efficiency assessment. We'll be sending out a link after the webinar for you to complete that. The second is we'd love to work with you to build a process map. We do this for no cost. I'm the guy who does these, since that's my role here at Flywheel. So you can email me directly, or there's a link on our website where you can actually look at my schedule and schedule a time. Process maps usually take about an hour to build. We have a template, and we can just customize it to fit your business, and then we'll give you the low-hanging fruit options of how you could improve your process efficiency. So thanks again for your time today. Feel free to email me with questions or comments or concerns and ideas, and we'd love to talk to you more, and we'll go from there. So thanks again for your time today, and have a good one. Bye.